Hey, everybody. Welcome to New York State Manufacturing Now, the podcast that's powered by Fuse Hub. I'm your host, Steve Melito. Today, we're talking to Catherine Bamberger, Senior International Trade Manager for Global New York. Catherine is based in Albany, but Global New York helps New York State companies enter or expand their presence in the global marketplace. That includes food and beverage manufacturing, something that we'll talk about today. Catherine, welcome to New York State Manufacturing Now.
Thank you, Steve. It's great to be here.
Third time's a charm. I'm so glad that we're here doing this. And, right off the top, so New York State has several thousand food and beverage manufacturers. That's a pretty good market. What would you like them to know about Global New York in general?
Well, our goal primarily is to help companies market and sell their products outside of the United States. So that means navigating different cultural mores, language barriers, regulatory environment. There are lots of little details that help make a company successful, and that will help them not only in those international markets, but also domestically. There's nothing like a good story saying, did you know we're being sold in London or Japan or, South America? It's a great story to be able to tell. And it's always exciting when people see things from their hometown or their home state in parts far flung.
It is. I would imagine, too, it can help you to get recognized. Sometimes it's hard to be sort of a star in your own backyard. People take things for granted. So, yeah, if you can be over
Very
in
true.
London, then you can become famous next door. Let's talk about some specific programs, starting with the Export Marketing Assistance Service, or EMAS.
Yes, EMAS, because we're all about acronyms here in government.
How does it help food and beverage manufacturers?
So not only food and beverage, but really any manufacturers. And we work with some contractors who actually live in these markets overseas. So they're stationed in 187 different countries around the world. They can provide information about those language and cultural differences, as well as distribution or supply chain or any of those other things that a company would need to know in order to be successful. And then they also can introduce them to local importers and distributors so that that relationship can be established, even if they're not necessarily seeing each other and being able to shake hands at first. They can find out a lot of information, now with technology and websites and the ability to do this kind of video chats and things like that. They can have a representative on the ground in the country to help introduce the New York food and beverage manufacturers with the local partner. And that's a free service. It's offered to companies that are at least adding more than half of their value within the state of New York. And that's typically everything from intellectual property, warehousing, manufacturing. Manufacturing is the easiest thing, but we also have some flexibility in counting other kinds of inputs just to make sure that they hit that criteria.
Great. So that's the EMAS program, Export Marketing Assistance Service. And the next acronym, a little easier to remember, is STEP. That's the Global New York State Trade Expansion Program. And
Correct.
It lets small businesses apply for up to $10,000 in grants.
Right. So that program is funded by our federal partners at the Small Business Administration. And because the balance of trade is so important to us, we need to make sure that we're playing in the global marketplace. And so we want to make sure that small businesses have an opportunity to access those markets as well. That's why we provide these programs. So it's not just that it's something nice to do. It's something that's important to do for the global economy and for the state's economy. And so we have this program where companies can get reimbursed for some of these export marketing programs that they might undertake. And that's everything from trade shows that are held here in the United States as well as overseas. They might need to do some tweaks to their website, translation of some of their materials or promotional brochures, or do some social media advertising. Any of those kinds of things to help them grow their business in these foreign markets are eligible for a 50% reimbursement up to $10,000 in any given program year.
Okay. And so for some of the website work, I would imagine that's for localization and the local language. Is that right?
That's part of it. But also, sometimes selling platforms or having understanding of exchange rates or if there's any shipping requirements that are different from their domestic markets, anything on the website that helps foreign customers navigate their website and be able to place orders.
Okay, and it's a good way to go to some of those big European trade shows, right?
European or domestic. So there are some that are here in the United States, including the fancy food shows, the natural products expos, sweets and snacks in Chicago, private label manufacturers. Those are all shows that have an international marketplace because those foreign buyers will come to the U.S. to see the best and brightest in the industry. But yes, also the big trade shows in Germany and London, all over the world. There's a really big one that just took place in February in Dubai that's called the Gulf Food Show. And that's a really cool one. There are shows in Japan, South America, Canada, really all over the world because, everybody's got to eat.
That's for sure. So that's the STEP program. This next program doesn't have an acronym. It's just the Global New York Grant Fund program.
That's correct.
It lets small businesses apply for grants up to $25,000 to begin or expand exporting, which to me sounds a lot like STEP, but how is it different and what should people know about it?
It is very different, and it's one that was launched when sometimes the federal funding can be volatile. So this was one that is state funded. And I like to compare the two. STEP is kind of like an a la carte menu. So you apply for an activity, you complete the activity, you get paid. And even though it's a $10,000 overall limit, each type of activity has a cap amount that's a little bit smaller. So trade shows are, say, $5,000 in reimbursement on a $10,000 or more spend. The Global New York Fund, you can combine multiple activities and include other things such as product certifications, and those are all combined into a single grant application. So it's a little bit more money. It's a little bit more involved in terms of an application process. And you only are paid at the end of all of the project's completion. So you might be out of pocket a little bit longer, but the total amount that you can access is larger. And so that's really the distinguishing factor between the two grant programs. The other thing is that trade organizations and nonprofits, so industry associations, food processing associations, chambers of commerce, or other consortia of multiple companies can apply for this funding, which is not true of the STEP grant. That's only for companies.
Okay, good. Thanks for explaining that. Those are some pretty key distinctions. So Global New York can also provide something called a certificate of free sale to companies who can't obtain this document elsewhere. Mm-hmm. What the heck is a certificate of free sale and why would I want one?
So technically, the certificate of free sale indicates to a foreign government that this product is the same product that they're offering for sale in their domestic home market, that it's not encumbered by any regulatory restrictions or anything, and that it is available. It's an export document. There are lots of different kinds. That's one of many that an importing government might require of a company. So for the Department of Agriculture and Markets, they inspect a lot of food processors. And for any of the companies that they inspect, they will provide this certificate of free sale. Oftentimes, companies will fall out of their jurisdiction either because they're not doing any regulated processing in the state of New York, and that's, another aside on the STEP grant. Because it's a federal program, the processing doesn't necessarily have to be in New York. The company needs to be headquartered in New York, but the processing or the ingredients could come from anywhere in the U.S. And so when that's the case, we will work with companies that can't obtain the certificate through the Department of Agriculture and Markets or through the federal government and provide this official New York State letter indicating that, yes, we're familiar with the company, we're familiar with their operations, we don't have them in violation of any of our regulations in the state, and that this is the same product that they're offering for sale here in the United States. It's sometimes used as a health certificate, sometimes used in lieu of other documents, but it's really just an assurance to the foreign importing government that, yes, this is an official product, an official company, and gives them some assurances that they're not just some fly-by-night organization.
Makes sense. So there's a partnership between Global New York and some other organizations, including New York Ag and Markets. to help food and beverage manufacturers develop some plans, access capital, and sell in Canada. Can you tell us some more, including maybe how to sign up for this?
Sure, absolutely. So we've partnered with the small business development centers across the state. They're located on a lot of SUNY campuses. And then the Department of Agriculture and Markets is also a member of a consortium of Northeastern and Midwestern states called Food Export. So the small business development centers are really great for companies that are in maybe earlier business mode. So maybe they've got a home processor's license, or maybe they're really just doing contract manufacturing or a small commercial kitchen manufacturing, and they're not necessarily ready to scale up, or they need some capital. And so that's where the small business development centers can really help them develop a marketing plan and then a growth plan. And part of that growth plan might be something like starting to export that can help increase the production capacity, find new markets to help balance out some of the volatility that they might be experiencing as they access newer and bigger customers. And their counseling is not necessarily specifically to export, but they do actually have an international exporting expert on their staff that covers the whole state. And then a lot of those same programs that we offer through Global New York are also offered through Food Export Organization. Their criteria being at least half the product has to be grown in the United States. So for some companies that are in confectionery or coffee roasting, chocolate, things that aren't grown in the United States, that's where we can help. And so rather than having companies try to figure out which programs they belong in and where they are, we formed this consortium of these export partners to help get companies the right information and the right kind of assistance that they need at the right time. And so we're trying to bring companies along that process to grow. And of course, our next nearest, largest customer and best friend is Canada, because we share a fairly significant border with not only two of the provinces, but also, most of their population lives within a very close drive of upstate New York. And they have a very strong affinity for American products. We share a language, even with the French language requirements of Quebec. Most of the business transactions with importers and distributors, the regulatory environment, all of that is all very similar and familiar. And so they're a great first market, particularly for a lot of food and beverage companies.
Good to know. So last year, Global New York sponsored an annual Fuse Hub event called Vitality in the Valley, and we thank you for that. It was great. What were some of the conversations that you had at this event, and are you going to come back this year?
Well, of course, it's a great event. Not only do we get to highlight some of the great food and beverage that's in the local area, but also, networking and all of the business supports and opportunities that Fuse Hub has to offer, again, to help with that scaling up or fixing hurdles or bumps in the road and to being a successful company through any kind of growth periods. And so the conversations that I tend to have, it's interesting. I've been doing this work for the state for quite some time now, and still more often than not will come across companies who've never heard of it, have no idea what we do, and didn't even realize that exporting was anything they could even consider for their business because it's just something they're not familiar with. It is a business of details. It's a business of relationships, but it is always interesting to me to find how many people just really don't even consider this as an opportunity or possibility. And it really is a good one. Other kinds of conversations is, just some of the storytelling, like not realizing that, once upon a time, our friends at Chobani had bought a little yogurt plant in upstate New York and were not the global powerhouse that they are now. And they took advantage of some of these programs and, grew the business, and they've made some smart investments and some smart decisions. And now they've got plants elsewhere as well, and they're selling all around the world. But also that some of the most iconic global brands came out of the state of New York. Not only Chobani, but Jell-O.
Really?
And, we had a lot of Bird's Eye plants in upstate New York. Pepsi is a New York brand. So we have a lot of those stories to tell about companies that have grown and done well. We have lots of stories about companies that have just for a period of time really met the right person, at the right time and were willing to entertain the opportunity. Maybe they had to make some tweaks to their product in terms of packaging or sizing or flavor profiles in order to be successful in that foreign market. But we have companies that are selling bagels in Japan and exporting beer. Everybody's interested in buying New York wines. We've got a lot of companies that do incredible pastry and bread products. We ship pizza, frozen pizza all over the world, ice cream, just lots and lots of examples. And those stories are always fun to share.
For sure. I'm going to get hungry. That's some good stuff.
I am a little hungry.
So, hey, last question for you, Catherine. How can food and beverage manufacturers get in touch with you or with Global New York in general for some more information?
Sure. So, of course, we have a website. It's part of the Empire State Economic Development website, esd.ny.gov. And there's, you can click through doing business, or you can just do a search on your favorite internet browser for Global NY in either STEP or EMAS. One of the programs will get you there. Or we do have an email address, globalny@esd.ny.gov. And of course, we're also on all your favorite socials, LinkedIn in particular. And of course, always through FuseHub. FuseHub is a great partner and makes a lot of references for us, which we're really grateful for. So, and of course, anybody can, and I'm talking to people across the northeastern part of the state for my day job, but food and beverage from across the state, given my history with agriculture and markets, and they can always reach out to me directly too.
Excellent. Catherine Bamberger, thank you so much for being part of New York State Manufacturing Now.
Steve, it's a pleasure, and it's always great to talk with you.
You betcha. So we've been talking to Catherine Bamberger, Senior International Trade Manager for Global New York, which helps New York State companies, including food and beverage manufacturers, enter or expand their presence in the global marketplace. Before we go, I'd like to invite you to mark your calendars for an upcoming event where food and beverage manufacturing and agriculture meet. It's called Vitality in the Valley, the event that you heard Catherine and I talk about. It's scheduled this year for June 3rd and 4th at Herkimer College in Herkimer, New York. June 3rd is exhibitor setup and a networking reception with amazing cuisine. June 4th is the main B2B event, which will include a keynote address from just about the biggest name in agriculture in New York State, and I'm not going to tell you just yet to keep you in suspense. If you'd like more information now, check out FuseHub.com/VIV2025 or email info@FuseHub.com. On behalf of FuseHub and New York State Manufacturing Now, this is Steve Melito signing off.